Welcome to Storytime Live. I'm Dr. Jennifer Bird. I'm a biblical scholar, and I like to read biblical passages in this series and talk about them, especially when they pertain to the topics of sex, the relationships we call marriage, and encounters between people involving intimate body parts. I'm doing this series as a way to talk about my book that just came out, which I'm excited about, and as a way to just talk about what's going on in these stories, passages in the Bible. So today we're going to pick up where we left off on Tuesday. We're going to read parts of 2 Samuel, chapters 8, 9, and 10, little bits and pieces, and then do revisit Bathsheba's story. So hang tight and we'll get started. So, hey there. I am slightly new setup again, so this might be a little awkward until I get used to it. But Minerva is in the house today. She's here from the start. She needed some snuggle time today, so here we go. There we go. There you have it. So, all right, let's just jump right into it. I don't need to do any plugging of things. We can just do a little story time today. So, there is that. Let me jump over to comments really quickly and put the website into the chat, and RLFANDF30 is the 30% discount code for those of you who might be interested, or just tell a friend who might be interested. That's great too. All right, so we're in 2 Samuel. Tuesday, we talked about this whole idea of the way that everything is discussed in light of, your ancestors after you that will come from your body, and I will take care of them, and all male. And of course, what else should we expect, right? It's not like it surprises me. It's that reading it over and over and over again with this kind of awareness is just wearing on me, because it's just tedious and lots of violence and lots of what seems to be completely unnecessary slaughtering of human lives, right? So let's look at a couple passages, and then we'll get on to revisiting Bathsheba's story, because I know I've done that already in the series, but in case some people didn't see that one or whatever, or if you've joined me since I did that one, and that's great. So I'm in 2 Samuel chapter 8. We talked about chapter 7 on Tuesday. So I'm going to read part of this and trying to remember the main reason that I decided to keep it in there. I think it was because of it. Some of this is just really interesting stuff. Like, I don't understand what he does when he's laying things out, and I didn't look at the footnotes on that. So it's just interesting. So here we go. Sometime afterward, so this is after this whole thing about David saying, I want to build a temple for the Lord, and then God saying, you're not going to do it. I'm going to let your son do it. So sometime afterward, David attacked the Philistines and subdued them again, right? David took Metheg Ammah out of the hand of the Philistines. He also defeated the Moabites. Now remember who the Moabites are, right? They are the descendants of Lot through one of his daughters, right? So anytime you hear a reference to the Moabites, we as people who are reading this story are supposed to identify with, the narrator, and we're supposed to know that, ooh, ick, right? Okay. He also defeated the Moabites. There was much celebrating. And making them lie down on the ground, measured them off with a cord. He measured 2 lengths of cord for those who were to be put to death, and 1 length for those who were to be spared. See, this is the thing. So I'm wondering if there's... Yeah, it's so funny when the people doing the translations don't find it the same things curious that I do, because I'd like to know what that's all about. Anyway, he okay, and the Moabites became servants to David and brought tribute. David also struck down King Hadadezer, son of Rehob of Zobah, as he went to restore his monument at the river Euphrates. That's a long way off, by the way, right? David took from him 1,700 horsemen and 20,000 foot soldiers. David hamstrung all the chariot horses. Why? But left enough for 100 chariots. When the Arameans of Damascus came to help King Hadadezer of Zobah, David killed 22,000 men of the Arameans. Then David put garrisons among the Arameans of Damascus, and the Arameans became servants to David and brought tribute. The Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. David took the gold shields that were carried by the servants of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. From Betah and from Berothai, towns of Hadadezer, King David took a great amount of bronze. There's a lot of, spoils taking, a lot of really stunning amounts of slot, right? I mean, it's unsettling to me. Thank you, A Town Like Music. I appreciate that. Sounds like I should be getting that particular study Bible. I think it's a recent release too, the SBL Study Bible annotations. So you all know what I'm looking at. I should probably put that up here. La 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 la. Yeah. Fairly recent release. David hates horses. Right. We should report him to PETA. Right. I'll just keep reading. There isn't a lot of like profound stuff here. It's more like, I just want to put it out there that this is what's going on. And this is how horrible so much of this content can be. And it's worth being aware of that, right? When King Toi of Hamath heard that David had defeated the whole army of Hadadezer, Toi sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and to congratulate him because he had fought against Hadadezer and defeated him. Now Hadadezer had often been at war with Toi. Joram brought with him articles of silver, gold, and bronze. These also King David dedicated to the Lord, together with the silver and gold that he dedicated from all the nations he subdued, from Edom, Moab, the Ammonites, the Philistines, Amalek, and from the spoil of King Hadadezer, son of Rehob of Zobah. So when I list off those people, Edom, those are the descendants of Esau. So those are the descendants who, even at the time of Amos, who was speaking to people the 7th century BCE, right? He's still declaring that the Edomites have been holding a grudge. It's a long time to hold a grudge. So 700, early 8th century, according to the storyline, that's, at least 400 years? I don't know. Depends on how you count the numbers and count the years or whatever. But anyway, so the people groups that are just listed, Edom, so Jacob's twin brother Esau, his descendants, Moab, and the Ammonites. So those are the two groups of people that came from Lot and his two daughters, the Moabites and the Ammonites. The Philistines, who were just the general, it's just a way to refer to people living in this part of the world. Excuse me, my nose is itchy. Also, there's a Phalassa. So there's also a possibility that it's a name for people who had migrated east, being referred to as the sea people or sea people of the sea who have come farther east. Debatable. Amalek, who's been in and out of this storyline, and then of course who we just referred to. So David won a name for himself with all this. When he returned, he killed 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. Like, killed 18,000 people. Why? Why is this necessary, right? There isn't room in all the land for all the people. I don't know. That I didn't mean that the way that sounded in terms of today, but there's an interesting parallel, I guess. Wah! He put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom, he put garrisons, and all the Edomites became David's servants. And the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. So David reigned over all Israel, and David administered justice and equity to all his people. Fuck that. Are you kidding me? I mean, raise your hand if you believe that for a second, right? He's just been slaughtering people. You don't go from being that kind of a semi-genocidal dictator to being equitable and just. No, I'm so sorry, but no. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. Sariah was secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. I did practice these, by the way. Jehoiada was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and David's sons were priests. I mean, that's just one chapter out of, several dozen. Okay, so let's go on. So the next chapter is kind of interesting, though there's nothing that pertains to my particular theme either, but let's talk about it just briefly. David asked, is there still anyone left of the house of Saul to whom I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake? As he said he would. Now, there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and he was summoned to David. The king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" He said, "At your service." The king said, "Is there anyone remaining of the house of Saul to whom I may show the kindness of God?" Ziba said to the king, "There remains a son of Jonathan." Right? So remember, even if Jonathan wasn't actually interested in women, he certainly had to have children because of the whole, family dynasty thing. He is crippled in his feet. You all know this story, right? Mephibosheth. Okay, the king said to him, "Well, where is he?" Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, son of Amiel, at Lo-debar." Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, son of Amiel, at Lo-debar. Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David. Why don't they name women? I mean, I know the answer. It just gets really... Yeah, these are the kinds of things that don't bother you the first time or two, but after reading them several hundred times, it gets old, right? Son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and did obeisance. David said, "Mephibosheth." He answered, "I am your servant." David said to him, "Do not be afraid, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land of your grandfather Saul. Wow. And you yourself shall eat at my table always." Well, that's an interesting claim. He did obeisance and said, "What is your servant that you should look upon a dead dog such as I?" Then the king summoned Saul's servant Ziba and said to him, "All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson." Very interesting. "You and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce, so that your master's grandson may have food to eat. But your master's grandson, Mephibosheth, shall always eat at my table." I need to reread that with you. Okay. Yeah. Hatfields and McCoys. Sorry, this is moving back in the comments. I saw that about, I did see one post by Dan McClellan about one of the pieces he wrote that ended up, probably as a grad student, that ended up in the SBL Bible. Yeah. Okay, so I just want to comment on this, back up and do this very briefly, and then I think we'll just move on to talking about Bathsheba again. So let's just talk about this for a moment. When it says servant, is actually, I'm fairly certain it's actually like enslaved person, right? In the Hebrew. I didn't double check this particular passage for that, but that's usually what's going on. Let's see how much time we have. I could go look it up to double check if you'd like. But the king summoned Saul's enslaved person, Ziba, and said to him, all that belonged to Saul and to all his house, I have given to your master, who is now dead, Saul, your master's grandson. Okay, so this dude has been with this family long enough, right? To whatever. I don't know how long, but it's been a few years since Saul died, yada, yada. So everything that you've been watching over for your master, you're the person who to whom you belonged or to whom you devoted all of your work and labor, right? I'm giving all of that to the master's grandson. You and your sons, so the enslaved person and his sons, and your servants. So the enslaved person or the person enslaved at a certain level also has his own people who are serving him, right? So your sons and your servants shall till the land for him, for Saul's grandson, and shall bring in the produce, so that your master's grandson may have food to eat. This is a nice way to take care of him, except for Mephibosheth has a permanent seat at David's table, so it's not necessary, is it? But your master's grandson shall always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants, 20 enslaved people at his beck and call, and 15 sons. And Ziba said to the king, according to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so your servant will do. Mephibosheth, say that 5 times fast, ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he always ate at the king's table. Now he was lame in both his feet. We heard that at the beginning. I think I'm pausing on this because people like to talk about the role of slavery or enslavement in the Bible, and it's pretty clear to me that we have that going on in multiple layers, right? Like, yeah. So there's a man who's been working in the house. Just because you treat a servant or an enslaved person relatively well doesn't mean that like it's, I think about when you have images of, because I've not actually met people who have butlers and maids like that, but like basically live-in staff, right? But, it's a living, they're being kept in a sense, but it's also, still not their own life. Anyway. All right, let's move on to chapter 11. We have chapter 10 has just a whole bunch more slaughtering going on. So we don't really need to read that. And chapter 11. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. They ravaged the Ammonites. I mean, I thought he already, I thought he had already defeated them a couple chapters ago. Why are they ravaging them again? Do you know what I mean? Well, the chapter in between talks about them coming up to battle. So I guess they aren't fully put down the way David would like, I guess. There's that. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. Dun, dun, dun. It happened. I'm looking, a gilded cage is still a cage. I'm looking at these, these comments. Right. That is my point. I appreciate that. Mikael Angelus, I wonder about your comment, if you're challenging me in being too literal, or if you have something else you're trying to say there. But as you were. It happened. I love this story. And I mean, I hate it, but I love it because there's so many pieces of it that are just hilarious. It, right? Like, what's the thing that happened? What are we talking about? This thing that David is scorned for. But anyway, it happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. So if you know of this story, yeah, if you know of this story, you may have heard. Here's the thing. One of the things about this story is one of the reasons I like to read it and why I'm doing it again is because people that in the traditions that I have been a part of in the past will do all kinds of blaming and shaming of Bathsheba. It's fascinating how many people, men and women, will try to blame her for being caught bathing as if she was trying to catch his eye. It's not like you get to move the bathing, the mikvah, or if there's another one in the house, like it's not like you get to move these around. It's not like it's a plastic tub, it is where it is. And the woman is, bathing after having her period. So like, fuck you. Like it has nothing, just go away with that silliness, but people will say that. They'll say she's trying to hook him, whatever. So I just think that's it's the misogyny and the objectification that we see in the stories continues today because people are not being because they're the examples, right? And because people are not being taught to be more empathetic in general, grand generalization of what people with less power in the situation might be experiencing. We'll just leave it at that instead of genderizing it because it happens to lots of people. Anyway, so this thing happened. She was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, this is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, the woman, my English says wife, the woman of Uriah the Hittite. So David sent messengers to get her. She came to him and he lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period, so we all know what that means. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant. That all takes place in 5 verses. The whole setup, which is the problem, right, doesn't even get more. No, it's not even 5. It's 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 4 verses. Thank you very much. Like it doesn't really matter. Like that part isn't the part we want to dwell on. We don't want to dwell on the fact that the king is behaving like a greedy little, I don't know, like, has no self-control or all of the things. Like this is where the problem is. And we're not spinning that out. We're going to spin out and tell these grand stories of how he tries to get away with it. Like, which part are we supposed to be learning from here, right? What is it that people of faith who read these stories, what's the takeaway? If this setup itself is almost an afterthought, because that's the issue. That's the moral, ethical issue is right there. You know what I'm saying? I'm laughing at one of the comments. I feel it's kind of rude to do that and not show it. So it is almost always a woman's fault for men reacting. And, yeah. And why is it, people still do that today, like literally today. People are still doing that. It's as if people aren't paying attention. This isn't new. It's not new to blame the woman. What were you wearing? How much did you had to drink? As if, right? I finally watched that movie. Oh, what is that movie called? Recently. It came out a few years ago. So good about this issue of blaming women for men's behavior. Promising Young Woman. Did anybody see that? Okay. Really good, actually. Blaming the victim and, men getting away with stuff and getting to downplay their actions, therefore not take the consequences very seriously and all this kind of stuff. It's a really deeply troubling, but because I loved it because of that, right? It's this kind of stuff, but put in a modern context. The main character of the story actually intentionally goes to bars and makes herself look like she's been drinking a lot, and sees what happens when someone sees her and how do they respond, and then anyway, anyway, it's a fascinating movie, fascinating commentary. We should do a watch party over that or something and talk about it. How many different connections can you see to biblical tropes? Okay, let's keep going. So, right, she gets preggers. David sent messengers to get her. She came to him. He lay with her. Of course, we need to comment on that, right? Did she have any options? Isn't this kind of like, did she enjoy it? Did she have a choice? Doesn't matter. Does it matter if she actually ended up enjoying it, even though she didn't want to do it? She didn't have a choice. Let's be clear about that. So is this a rape? Like, it's not called that. Is it a rape? Would it change things if the story actually said that? Would it help people to see David differently, or maybe even men today? And again, I don't hate men. And I love that there's so many dudes that show up, guys who show up for these and like watch later and comment and engage. I love that. It makes me really happy. So when I make these comments, these generalizations, I'm talking about people who behave badly or who aren't as thoughtful and kind and empathetic as many of you all are. So anyway, what was my point there? Shouldn't have a choice. Would it change things if at some point in the story it was called rape? Because it is, when the one son of David in a few chapters rapes his half sister, they call that a rape, right? They call Shechem attacking Dinah a rape. But so it's not like the narrators don't have a word for it. Why aren't they saying, so David sent messengers to get her, she came to him, and he forced himself upon her, right? I haven't looked at the Hebrew here, just to be honest. Yeah, I like the ones who are responsible adults and not the ones who are emotional man children. Indeed. Yeah, agreed. Do you know what I'm saying though? Like, why what's going on here? We were talking about translation issues on Tuesday, the last story time. And I feel like I need to go look up the language here because I don't know what language is being used in the Hebrew that might be being covered over there. It hadn't occurred to me until just now to look into that. Is anyone here? Hey, Mike, is anyone here able to read Hebrew enough to go look at it and see? Yashav. If there's Yashav, Shachav, those are the two that imply laying down. If someone else can go look at that, that'd be great. But if you can't, that's okay too. Anyway, that's verse 4. Verse 4. Sent messengers to get her. She came to him. He lay with her. Anyway, if not, I'll look it up later. Okay. So we keep going. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite, and Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came home, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going, all the appropriate things. And then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. This is a euphemism for go have sex with your woman, right? Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king to make sure that he washed his feet thoroughly. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the enslaved people of his lord and did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house, David's like, what? You've just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah remain in booths, tents, out in fields. And my lord Joab and the servants of my Lord, the enslaved people of my Lord, are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my woman? My English says wife. As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing. I mean, yeah, he's a Hittite. He's not even an Israelite, right? Uriah. And it's an interesting commentary that, he's being shown to be so upright and behaving as a soldier should. And, being true to what his, what is typically asked of people. And so he's the opposite, right? A direct contrast to David, who stayed home instead of going to war, right? And therefore fell into the seduction of Bathsheba. Yeah, I don't actually think of it that way. Right. So, we could go into literary mode, the whole foil and all that stuff, like this character that David is about to assassinate, is morally upright, way beyond David, and yet David gets to be king, and he gets to just apologize to God for it, and not to, Bathsheba, not to whatever. So do you want to keep reading this story, or like, are you just so familiar with it and you're done with talking about it that you're like, we don't need to keep going? I'm happy to either way, to be honest. I read this story a lot because it's, I think this is an interesting observation while I wait for people to catch up to my question. I find that a really fascinating observation that I resonate with. Okay. At least one person's enjoying the story, so I'll keep going. Okay. So, yeah. So David's like, dude, you've come from a journey. Why didn't you go have sex? And he's like, I would never do such a thing. And David said to Uriah, remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening, he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to his house. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab. He's like, this isn't working. My plan isn't working. The dude is too upright, right? And he sent it by the hand of Uriah. What do we call this kind of stuff? Like, when it happens in Shakespearean plays, the morally upright, the best of the best, is hand delivering his own assassination note. There's got to be a word for this. I don't know what it is, but there's got to be one. Thought I fixed the glare issue from Tuesday, but apparently I did not. All right. So he sent this note with Uriah back to Joab. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting and then draw back from him so that he may be struck down and die. As Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant warriors. The men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite was killed as well. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting. And he instructed the messenger, when you have finished telling the king all the news about the fighting, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near the city to fight? And did you not know they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal? Did not a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Thebez? Did you not learn anything? Why do you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, I mean, this is, it's so funny. Like, we're getting play-by-play over and over again. Don't tell me that only women like to tell a good story and like to tell all the details. Don't tell me it's just women, because we've got dudes telling these, step by step multiple times. Okay. The men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Not even waiting for David to get confused. David said to the messenger, thus you shall say to Joab, do not let this matter trouble you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Press your attack on the city and overthrow it. And encourage him. When the woman, my English's wife, when the woman of Uriah heard that her man, my English's husband, that her man was dead, she made lamentation for him. When the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house. She became his woman and bore him a son. My English said wife right there, obviously. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord, and the Lord sent Nathan to David. And this is where I like to ask, which part of this was displeasing to the Lord? Was it the cover-up? Was it forcing her to have sex with him to begin with? Was it David's lack of discipline that he wasn't even out on the battlefield and none of this would have happened? Which part is the problem here? Nathan came to him and said to him, there were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. This story always makes me sad. This story is hard for me to read. Is anyone else like, it really upsets me deeply. Just gonna tell you that, just so you know, like it makes me so, Okay. There were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. He brought it up, and it grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat of his meager fare and drink from his cup and lie in his bosom. It was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was loath to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to see him. So he took the poor man's lamb and prepared that for the guest who had come to him. So random, but the English translation says, but he took the poor man's lamb instead of so. And that's a conjunction that could go either way, I think. And that's random, but it's, anyway. It says something about intention, but so he took the poor man's lamb and prepared that one. So upsetting. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. He said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. He shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity. Nathan said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I rescued you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house. I mean, it's interesting claims here, right? And your master's women, my English's wives, into your bosom, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have added as much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? Wait for it. You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword. And you have taken his woman to be your woman. My English says wife in both cases. Nothing about the initiating event. So the Lord is a patriarchal asshole as well, right? Because it doesn't bother him. Okay. Thus says the Lord, and women, the females in these stories are being punished over and over for someone else's issues, right? I will raise up trouble against you from within your own house, and I will take your women, this is wives, before your eyes and give them to your neighbor and he shall lie with your women, English wives, in the sight of this very sun. I'm going to punish you by inflicting horrific torment and torture on the women who belong to you right now, because that's fair. You did it secretly. Aha. So there's an implication of him having taken Uriah's woman, right? You did it secretly. But I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun, in the light of day, if you will. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. That's it. Not I've sinned against Uriah, which is what, in terms of adultery, is how they saw it, that David had sinned against Uriah. Not I've sinned against Bathsheba by forcing her to lay with me. Like, none of that. No, I've sinned against the Lord. And so this is why I feel like a broken record sometimes on this story time, because the same issues keep coming up, but I just feel like, all right, well, let's just name it just to make sure, in case you haven't heard it before. This kind of a thing is part of why I think it is often hard for people coming from more conservative Christian communities. People will focus on their sinning against the Lord instead of their having harmed someone else. And so they just ask the Lord for forgiveness. And whether or not they try to say, I'm sorry to the humans, that's secondary, because of the example that is set time and again in the biblical passages, focusing people's language onto your sin has offended God. It doesn't matter. I've been watching a lot of shows recently with a lot of cussing. Like, oh God, there's a lot. Offending God has nothing to do with what's happening here on earth. You know what I mean? Like, our sin offends God. I mean, I understand that is one of the, that's central tenet of most Christians' belief system. Not all Christians, by the way, but many. And I think for many Jews, there's a framework there of, sin is offending your neighbors or potentially God. But I know that I spent time in Christian circles and spaces and institutions where the language, the example being set here is really powerful. And it's a frustrating one for me. It's one I feel like calling out when I see it, right? The women don't matter, right? Their property, their baby makers. The idea that the Lord, as talked about here, would punish David by having the women who belonged to him raped in front of him. Like, what? How does that come from? Oh, you know what I mean? Like, where does that come from? How is that justified in any way, shape, or form? I'm going to take this quick little super chat. Thank you for showing up. Love Dr. Bird. Yes. To question and cherry pick. And question other people's cherry picking. Amazing. You are so kind. Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you so much. Yeah. Nope, it happened again. Hang on. I gotta fix that since that happened. Audio. Go back to. Oh, good. Okay. Have you gotten your copy, by the way, Derek? Do we get to talk soon? Okay. So David said to Nathan, I've sinned against the Lord, right? So that's why I had my little tirade about that. I've sinned against the Lord. That is the framework that Christians tend to use, that sinning makes God angry. And that's why we have to atone for our sins by this whole like blood ritual thing with Jesus' death, yada, yada, because we've offended God, right? And I just think, wow, it was so freeing when the day I realized I didn't need to think about it that way anymore. Yeah, okay. Nathan said to David, now the Lord has put away your sin because you've acknowledged it, I guess. You shall not die. Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord. That child that is born to you shall die. Again, the woman, Bathsheba, in this case, is being punished for David's misdeeds to her. Right? I mean, it's just right. Everybody else is all for okay. Yeah, it's good. Little love to our friend Derek. Thanks, Carrie Ann. Oh, and thank you, Holy Man. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I'm grateful that people are reading it. It's funny because it's not a fast read. Not a fast read. Most of my published work isn't a fast read, but because I want you to think about stuff, But yeah. I'm gonna get to talk to Godless Granny. Does anyone here know Godless Granny? She and I are doing a conversation on Saturday. That'll be fun. I think one of you actually recommended me to her. So I appreciate that. Whoever that was. Thank you. Looking forward to talking with her. Okay, so let's wrap up this story. So the child that is born to you shall die. God is punishing David and not even thinking twice about how it's affecting Bathsheba, the mother, right? So again, women are just placeholders, baby makers, yada, yada. We don't really care about them. Over and over and over. And, again, I'm struck by how there's an incident, it happened, took 4 verses to narrate, and then we have 2 chapters addressing the fallout, right? All right. The Lord struck the child that Uriah's woman, my English's wife, bore to David, and it became very ill. David therefore pleaded with God for the child. David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. The elders of his house stood beside him, urging him to rise from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the 7th day, the child died. I mean, it's a terrible thing to lose a child. It doesn't matter if it's only 7 days old or, 2 weeks. I have a student who just lost a child, a 13-year-old child, just very kind of, in a sense, somewhat sudden, unexpectedly, related to health issues they just didn't know were happening. Oh gosh. I mean, I don't think there isn't consolation for that, right? There aren't words there just aren't, the death of a child. It's just devastating, right? And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, "Oh, while the child was still alive, we spoke to him and he did not listen to us. How then can we tell him the child is dead? He may do himself some harm." But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, he perceived what was going on. And David said to his servants, "Is the child dead?" "Yes, he is dead." Then David rose from the ground, washed, anointed himself, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. I would love to remove that line personally. But anyway, he then went to his own house. And when he asked, they set food before him and he ate. The servant said, What is this thing you've done? You fasted and wept for the child while it was alive, but when the child died, you rose and ate food. He said, "Well, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, who knows, the Lord may be gracious to me and the child may live. But now that he's dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me." This is the one moment of, insight or semi-wisdom, I suppose, in all of his story. Right? I mean, when people who do believe that there's a God manipulating every single thing that's happening, that kind of reasoning makes sense to me, right? Show how contrite he is. And then once the dead child is gone, what's to be done? Then David consoled his woman Bathsheba, my English's wife, and went to her and lay with her. This is the thing. This is so obvious, right? I'm so sorry. Do you really think that's what she wanted? Is that what? how she wanted to be consoled was for him to stick his penis in her again. Like, you really think that's the way you console her? Her child just died. I mean, come on. I maybe it is. Maybe it is a thing that works for some people. I should ask some people many years after they've lost their child to see if that would have been consoling to them the day or two after their child died. Okay. I keep wanting to say, how male-centered this is. And again, being very aware there are plenty of males even here today who wouldn't be thinking this way. But it just, oh my gosh, that is such a, I want to say that's such a male thing to say. That this is how he's going to console her. Anyway, she bore a son, and he named him Solomon. The Lord loved him and sent a message by the prophet Nathan. So he named him Jedediah because of the Lord. Beloved of the Lord. So now Joab fought against Rabbah, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we move on, and we move on into the storyline about David and Absalom, right? And David's son Amnon. And so the one I referred to just a minute ago. So this is in this story, right? It's not called in chapter 13. It's not called rape either. He forced her and lay with her. So I'm gonna, if you're still with us, thank you so much for hanging out. And I'm gonna do I'm gonna go look at the Hebrew right now in these passages because I'm curious what the language is that's being used. So if you want to hang out to see where this goes, that's great. But I think this is where I'm gonna wrap up after this. After we figure out what's going on with this language. 2 Samuel 13, chapter 14. So 2 Samuel 13. And then we'll do a parallel when that pulls that up. And, oh, hang on. That is not the version I want. All, and we'll go down here to Hebrew. I'm sure it's probably Shachav or Yasha, one of the lay with, but I just, I have all these questions now that I hadn't thought to look at before. All right, here's the Hebrew. Hebreet, Westminster, Leningrad Codex, and then verse 14, the end of 14 is probably Yashav. But, yeah, Vayesha. Oh, yeah, Shachav. Shachav, I remembered from seminary. Shakav sounds to shack up. Shachav. To lay with, to go to bed with. No, there isn't inherently any sense of force involved in this word, Shachav. Otah. So he lay with her. Yeah. So now I'm curious if the word rape comes up anywhere in the English translation. Just Dina, twice in Judges. Oh yeah, the right, the woman. Judges 19. 2 Samuel. Oh, where's that used in 2 Samuel? Right. After that. I didn't go far enough. Sorry. Because he loved. Yeah, because he had raped his sister Tamar. So now, let's go see what that says. And this is verse 22. What's the verb there for rape? I haven't looked. I'm not sure that I know it in Hebrew. And then I will be done with this thing here. Terminology is fun sometimes. It can also be a distraction, keeping us from addressing what I think are sometimes the more important issues. But it is also, from time to time, interesting to me. So, because he had raped his sister Tamar, that's verse 22. Okay. So, but Absalom spoke to Amnon, neither good nor bad, for he hated Amnon because he'd raped his sister Tamar. And that's end of 22. Et Amnon Aldavar, he spoke. Aldavar Asher Ina, with him. Mm-hmm. Ina et Tamar, Achoto. Yeah, ki save of Shalom. What? Oh, interesting. Avshalom. Avshalom. That's Absalom, right? Avshalom is Absalom at known. Okay. It's very interesting. Yeah, Tov. Neither evil nor good. Yeah, for Sane. Okay. Well, I have, ash. That's the verb. It is a verb. I can go look it up now. Okay. So there's that. Thanks for hanging in there. Oh, glad you hung in there with me. I appreciate that. To be fair, if people all stop doing anything with me. Yes. All very, wait. I think I missed some fun banter over here, which is good. I'm glad that you all were finding a way to entertain yourselves while I was looking up Hebrew verbs. Anyway, okay. So yes, the language there is that, at first it just says that he forced her to lay with him, and I'm imagining that's what it says in chapter 12 with Bathsheba, that he lay with her, right? He had her come to him, he tapped that, send her home. Preggers. So anyway, thank you for hanging in there today. I hope it's been a fun distraction for those of you who are here, and I appreciate that you do come, you show up, that you are interested and able, and that you show up and hang out and chat a little bit. And if you're watching this later, thank you so much for watching it later. And I enjoy the comments that happen during and even afterwards. So thank you for that. And I appreciate it when you tell others about the work I'm doing. I am very excited, very proud of the book that just came out. Marriage in the Bible, What Do the Texts Say? I'm hoping that it will help people. Lots of different people, I think, can benefit from the book. People who want to be in a faith community and don't know what to do with the biblical passages that they've thought said no to same-sex marriage, for instance, how to handle that. And people who don't really care, but maybe are curious why others get hung up on certain biblical passages or why they have certain beliefs. I'm also addressing that. So people who maybe from a secular position, but who care about what's going on in the larger conversation, want to understand a little bit better why somebody gets so worked up over this idea of two men having sex or two women having sex. Like, there are really interesting and very long traditions that teach people to think that way, right? So I'm an educator at heart. I want to help people understand, and that works in both directions in this general framework, right? Understanding what to do with this, understanding why some people get so hung up. So I genuinely am addressing both of those kinds of groups of people in this book. So anyway, thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for liking my work, passing it along to friends. Thanks for those of you who support me financially with random super chats. Thank you, Derek. Or those of you who are my patrons at Biblical Bird, or who have purchased either of my second or third book, or in particular my second book on audio, because I get more of the income on that. But just thank you for all the ways you support me and that you keep showing up. Yeah. I'll see you all next week.